It has been 5 long years since Lady Gaga dropped a big pop album, which is a shame because few artists know how to orchestrate an album rollout and turn it into like an event like Lady Gaga. But we are so back. Gaga's new album, Mayhem, came out today. I have thoughts. The group chat has thoughts. Let's get into it. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Get in here. It is International Women's Day weekend. It is Gaga weekend. It is not an understatement to say that Gaga has been one of the core engines of pop music for the last 15 years or so. But this time, it's different. It's different because Gaga is returning to a post-Chappell Roan, post-Charlie XCX world that she essentially helped create. So how does that how does that actually end up influencing the story that Gaga has to tell right now? The group chat is here. They have thoughts. Joan Summers is here. Alessa Dominguez is here. Liisa Ladouceur is here. What's up, y'all? How's it going? Welcome to the show. Nice to see you.
Hey, Elamin, how are you? Long time no see.
Hello. We have so much to get into. I think this is going to be a good time. And you know what? The place we're going to start is with a little bit of Lady Gaga magic right here.
Like a poem said by a lady in red, you hear the last few words of your life. With a haunting dance, now you're both in a trance. It's time to cast your spell on the night. Abracadabra, amor una na. Abracadabra, morta ugaga.
The poet said, Amor una na abracadabra morta ugaga. That's what the poet said. That is Lady Gaga reminding us of the magic that she gave us with, Bad Romance. This is on the new album. This is on Mayhem. Joan, I'm going to start with you because this is the first big album from Gaga in 5 years. When we think about anticipation for this album, you had a lot of anticipation for this record. Did it deliver on all that weight and that anticipation?
Yeah, actually, it surpassed it, surprisingly enough. I mean, the conversation amongst people online has been so divisive this morning because I think people were expecting a sort of like dark, grungy, Berlin-ready, like post-Eusexua type of album. And I was hoping she would go back to her big theatrical pop roots, which is how she describes the Fame, which this album is very much not necessarily an homage to, but a response to after all of these other detours she's taken in her career. And she delivered on that. It is big, it is bombastic, it is full of lyrical flourishes and storytelling, which people have come to love from Gaga, especially her core fan base. And there are just so many moments that were completely unexpected for me, like Zombie Boy. I think I must have listened to it already 100 times, and every time there's just something else about it that sucks me right back in. Same with Vanish Into You, which to me is probably one of the most perfect songs she has ever created in her career. I like some of the nods on the album to like the melody of Bad Romance, which shows up a few times. She's interpolating some old ideas of hers. It just was fabulous. I'm trying not to swear, but imagine that was expletive laced.
I'm imagining the F word just like every other word in you describing this album. I'd have to say that like when I put on this record, I was not one of the people who was expecting an industrial record from Lady Gaga. Like I just don't think of her as someone who's invested in that sort of like sonic aesthetic. Like she's visited a few times, but I don't think I'd see her living in that space. But also B, when you hear a song that say like a poem said, like a lady in red, I'm like, you want to play with colors, you want to be a pop star, you want to have a little bit of fun. Me personally, I was like, no, I think we're gonna get a grand tour of all the things that Lady Gaga sort of managed to accomplish. I want to play you guys a clip of an interview that she did with Zane Lowe of Apple Music. Here she is talking about like the larger concept of the title Mayhem.
My way of thinking of music as being cross-genre, being able to combine lots of different things at the same time, that is who I am as a musician, and I've always been that way, and that is what Mayhem is all about. It's like the mayhem of like being a non-linear artist, and with this album, embracing that about myself instead of being like, okay, I have to like fit it into this one thing.
Alessa, it has been always organic for Lady Gaga, I feel, to visit different sonic landscapes and borrow from them what she wants to, and then come back and say, this is how I interpret this and put it into the pop machine. Like, that's something that I really love about her, is that the cohesive thing for me about this record is that it's weird. It's weird in a Gaga way. You know, I think like when Abracadabra came out, there was like this TikTok came out of this guy who was like, she's weird again. I'm so happy that she's weird again. And that's the main driver of this record. But do you feel when you listen to this album, does it feel cohesive to you, even though she's kind of jumping around to different landscapes?
I think it was helpful to sort of hear her sort of take on what the album, that the notion of Mayhem is sort of bringing together the disparate elements, including sort of I think that Gaga has, from my perspective, has kind of struggled in sort of making cohesive statements that kind of bring in together the pop star, the woman, the celebrity, and sort of being specific. Like, I feel like I love like specific lyrics, like that feel like they are coming from some kind of something that someone experienced and I feel like there has been, in this album, I loved the second half much more than the first half. I mean, I love Disease, I like Disease. But I thought, so some of I just find some of the metaphors a little like boring or obvious, like Love Drug, Zombie Boy, like it's like really springs and floral and springs. It's like some of the metaphors are just like, I wish like I wanted more specifics. And I feel like when she leans into like the horror show that is being a straight woman, that often yields really good stuff. Like I loved Don't Call Tonight, How Bad Do You Want Me? But I think but I agree that it's definitely a return to sort of maximalist theatrical Gaga. And then obviously with the ballad, the sort of duet ballad, that's kind of a nod to the market with Mars and kind of a very radio friendly, kind of AC pop friendly ballad. But yeah, my favorite part of the album, the one where I feel like she's being specific and like it is interesting to me, is like where she really gets into like the horror show being a straight woman.
You mentioned that you love Disease, and I'm glad that you brought up Disease. I just want us to play a little bit of Disease right now. Lady Gaga with Disease. Look, as you can hear there, she is going for a bit of a harder edge on that sound. Gaga sort of cited that Nine Inch Nails is a big influence on this record. And if you watch the video, I think for Disease, you maybe would think that you're watching like a Marilyn Manson video from the mid-90s. Liisa, you literally wrote the encyclopedia on all things goth, which is Encyclopedia Gothica. When you see Lady Gaga visiting the industrial and gothic and that kind of aesthetic, do you buy it? Do you buy, her relationship with that corner of pop music?
Well, she's definitely visiting. I found
like she's a tourist. Yes.
I thought it was interesting that two of you said, "Oh, we weren't expecting an industrial record." It's like, but that's what she said. Like she gave interviews saying that she was influenced specifically by Nine Inch Nails. She was influenced by grunge and industrial. And I'm like, I'm looking at the album cover.
For a whole album, you mean? Yeah.
Well, as part of the influence of this record, and I'm looking at her fashion sense lately and this sort of like funereal fetish stuff she's got going on, and the album cover is black and white. And I know my expectations were, oh, this could be interesting and dark, but it's really just some 90s industrial presets with like none of the transgression, none of the taboo, none of the sort of pushing ideas that those bands were doing. So I was disappointed. But I also can recognize that it's something that the fans are going to love.
Can I just say, okay, can I play this idea out a little bit more, Joan? Because I don't think it's an accident that she's very directly referencing Marilyn Manson. And Marilyn Manson, with the sort of storm of sexual misconduct accusations that have happened over the last few years or so, I think like the idea that he was this sort of transgressive artist of the 90s who was willing to play with gender in a moment where very few people in the 90s were willing to play with gender, it feels like it's lost. It feels like it's sort of like lost its place in culture. And to me, like Gaga playing with this aesthetic is trying to say, we can rescue the idea while maybe not venerating the person. And to me, it sort of felt like a very direct reference to being like, no, what Manson was trying to play with was actually worth exploring. And I'm going to make a direct, but maybe not named reference to that. Okay, Lisa, then Joan. Yes.
So I don't want to interrupt anyone. I'll just say, I'm not talking about him.
Yeah, no.
He's totally irrelevant.
No, at all.
I'm talking about Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah, okay, so. That's fair. That's fair. And to me, like the references are actually more explicitly Manson than they are
in the video.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Joan, what do you think about the idea that Gaga's maybe trying to play with that a little bit?
I mean, I think Gaga's entire career has been not necessarily about like quite literally transgressing things. I think what she does best is she's very like explicit in like sort of being this like amalgam of a million different ideas all at once. And all of her albums are very much the same. I mean, if we go back to the Fame, you know, she's doing David Bowie, she's playing on these like sort of old glam rock stars, she's pulling from these like weird dives that she was in the Lower East Side, she's ripping off songs, she's ripping off Madonna, and is very like quite clear about that she's sort of this like facsimile blender, so to speak, of the pop culture around her. She's sort of filtering these ideas that are out there and then processing them in a way that is, I think at the time, musically speaking, quite exciting. Now with Mayhem, I think what she's doing here is very much like looking back on her career itself. And the mayhem on the album, like she says, is my own personal mayhem. And it doesn't quite seem like it's all together. I don't think it's necessarily just about any one artist on this album. I mean, there is a song, if we're going to talk about men with allegations, so to speak, or just like, you know, controversy, charges, lawsuits. There is a song quite literally that is a Michael Jackson song on the record. I mean, if you listen to Shadow of a Man, the first thought I said when I listened to that was, oh, she's doing Michael Jackson here, you know? And I don't think that by sort of calling up that shadow, so to speak, if we're going to play on the title of that song, that she is quite literally either exonerating or venerating Michael Jackson, but he was sort of in this soundscape that she's playing with in the 80s on the album, I think.
Yeah, I don't think it's not lost on me that, you know, Lady Gaga is someone who is not an absolutist when it comes to these things. She's trying to say this is the culture that produced all of us, and it's sort of on all of us to maybe like think about how we got here. Alessa, this album arrives at a particularly interesting moment, I think, in pop music, which is like we're maybe witnessing a bit of a changing of the guard. You know, you have Chapel, you have Sabrina, you have a sort of a resurgent and ascendant Charlie leading this new wave. We're talking about like these are singers who maybe wouldn't have the same kind of career in the same way without Lady Gaga. How do you think Gaga fits into the moment now?
Well, actually, we're going to talk about the moment. The #1 album in the US right now is Tate McRae.
Go off.
And
Canada's own. Yes.
Yeah. So I think what's interesting is that, in my opinion, I feel like Gaga, since like Joanne, which was like kind of like a post-streaming, I mean, again, I just want to make sure that people understand I'm a Gaga fan.
Yeah.
I like the music. I think as a pop star, she kind of struggles she has all these ideas she's like, Joanne is about stripping down, but it's also about My Dad's Dead On, but it's also about a girl in Kmart. Like she has all these ideas that she's like, and I think as a pop star, she like, sometimes kind of like there's a little bit of like confusion. And I think what Joan just said about like she's like an homageist, a maximalist homageist. And I think that the question of sort of kind of in a certain way, the question of like inspiration or is not, she's an earnest homageist. And it's a collage. And I agree that listening to this album made me realize Gaga has been very consistent. I mean, her albums are very Gaga. There's like the theatrical. I think post A Star Is Born, when she kind of, but even with A Million Reasons and like a bunch of songs, she sort of started leaning into the big balladeer tradition, the big radio. I mean, but again, to go back to the streaming thing, I think that post-streaming, post-Beyonce, and the surprise album drop and the personal autobiographical stunningness of like the self-titled and Lemonade.
Yeah.
I think there was like a change in pop stardom. It became very intimate. I think Joanne was a confusing pop star moment in that sense.
Yeah.
This very, again, Gaga is sometimes very literal in a way that is, I suppose, necessary to be a huge pop star, like she was talking about in the Zane Lowe interview. That she became this superstar. I mean, let's remember, that first album, it was like a Britney or Whitney level explosion.
Yes.
But the music was very, again, she didn't want to be Britney or Whitney. She wanted to have this kind of underground,
apparel track. Yeah.
Yes. And we can talk about whether she really was or not or whatnot. I find these questions of authenticity increasingly boring. I mean, but I did think it was funny in the Zane Lowe interview. She went to like the bar that like sort of started it all and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I think it works in the sense that it's Gaga. Again, to me, there's something about, like, for instance, there's that song on the album, Perfect Celebrity, where because again, to Joan's point, it's about her personal mayhem, but she kind of confuses sometimes in a way that I actually find confusing as a listener.
Which one is the real and which one is a celebrity? Yeah, like I think
yes,
yeah,
the personal and the professional.
Listening to Commotion, and we're talking about this new Lady Gaga album that just came out. It's called Mayhem. Joan Summers is here, Alessa Dominguez is here, and Liisa Ladouceur is here. Okay, I want to play the song that Alessa referenced earlier. This is "Die with a Smile."
If the world was ending, I'd wanna be next to you. If the party was over and our time on earth was through, I'd wanna hold you just for a while and die with a smile.
Lady Gaga, Bruno Mars, "Die with a Smile." That song is right now the #2 song on the Billboard Canadian Hot 100. It spent 6 weeks at #1. It's the last song on this new Lady Gaga album. Liisa, I feel like there's something about this idea of, there's Lady Gaga, the sort of transgressive pop artist who's sort of like pulling from all these images. And then there is the traditionalist. The traditionalist, literally in the sense of like, here's a big ballad. This is always going to work. Alessa referenced earlier the idea that this song is like engineered for adult contemporary radio. How do you fit those two personas together? This instinct of wanting to sort of, pull all these homages and be like, let's get a little weird with them. And then the instinct to go, here's such a big ballad that is like straight down the middle as a pitch to radio, to sort of all these formats that we're already so familiar with.
Well, I'll say that, excuse me, I'll say that weird is relative, right? So like, she's not that weird in my world, but in a pop sense, she's super weird, and I love it because I believe that she is authentically weird.
Yeah.
She's not just like flirting with it.
Yeah.
And what I like about her is she's not like in a box and then steps out of the box. She's always in a different box, and it's all her. And so I do think the album is very genuine. I agree with everything Alessa was saying about that kind of personality that's all over the place. And I wish also that she had lyrics that were a bit like more direct sometimes. But I think at the end of the day, she's doing something that is true to her, and that, like a lot of us, I listened to Nine Inch Nails. I loved her Tony Bennett record. Like I think that is also a part of the streaming age that we're in, is not underestimating the breadth of interest of the listener. Now, in terms of that one ballad, this is not the end of the world sentiment I'm personally looking for right now, but clearly I'm off the bell curve because some people do want to die with a smile, I guess.
It's a bit nihilistic, hey? It's a bit of a...
No, not enough. I mean, I grew up in the Cold World. We had Dancing with Tears in My Eyes. A little bit different
Fair
vibe.
enough. You're like, we can go much further.
We can go
much further than this. Okay, I want to play another clip from that conversation with Zane Lowe.
I mean, what I would say first and foremost is what trans people are being faced with in this world is completely unfair, wrong, and there's this like violence that's taking place on a daily basis in their lives. And I think that we all need to support trans people and each other to know that they deserve to be supported and loved and protected and lifted up.
I think Joan, to me, like Gaga's always kind of explicitly taken seriously the idea that her music connects with and has been uplifted by queer communities from the very beginning. She's like, these are my people, and I will take care of them the way they take care of me, and that has felt like a safe relationship in a way. And I think of this most explicitly when, she did the Super Bowl halftime show, and Born That Way was interpolated with This Land Is Your Land. And that was like the first year of the Trump presidency when and like for her to be doing that at the biggest stage, that's her saying, you know what, I'm going to actually use the stage as a political statement. Do you see any significance, in the fact that she's coming back now with an album at the same time that trans rights, particularly in the United States, are under attack in this particular moment?
Yeah, as an American, I'll like speak directly to being a trans woman, like living under the current administration and through this political moment. I was also out when Born This Way came out, and I was like living amongst my friends as like a trans person, even though that wasn't necessarily quite where the world was at yet with me. And it's interesting looking back on that album in particular and sort of the run up to Born This Way, because so much of it was about, I'm doing this for the queer community. I'm doing this for the queer community. I'm doing this for the fans that have uplifted me. And I think going back to it now and a lot of the research I've been doing on Gaga recently in my own work, there is like a cringe, right, about that sort of millennial optimism that is almost hard to stomach with this current moment, because the project that she's speaking to of creating a new human race of love and compassion and oneness, and we're all born this way, so we're all different, because we're all born our own unique kind of way. That project failed. I think like that sort of liberal ideology has failed in sort of the popular discourse. We have to build something new now, but she has very always explicitly been quite clear in her music in a way that basically almost no other working current pop star has been. I mean, Madonna does still tour an AIDS tribute song in her acts. I saw her last year. She did her big AIDS number, her AIDS memorial number. And so I don't want to give discredit to, the pop girls of all time, but of our current stable of like working, touring pop stars, Gaga of the newer generation is one of the only pop stars that has consistently centered queer people, trans people, gay people in her music, and sort of has always said, I do this for you. I only do this for you. Everything else is sort of secondary to this like new life's work that I have found. And while I think at times that's read as cringy, I was actually working on a series recently, and I went back and I found this like sort of archived newspaper, the Metro, the weekly newspaper that Canada used to have, where in it she guest edited an entire issue for the run up to Born This Way. And one of the things that she centered in that issue was a spread about the rights of trans people in Canada and how they didn't meet the standards that she was hoping for. And just going back to like 2012, 2011 specifically, that feels unheard of now. Like what other pop star in 2011 was like looking at like the governmental rights of, say, trans people, not even in the country that they're actually working in, but a country like Canada, and saying like, you know what, this isn't up to snuff, I need this to change, and like putting that in a weekly newspaper. I don't know, it does feel groundbreaking. And so I do feel now with this current album, like she knows who her audience is, she knows who the Little Monsters are, she knows who's followed her through album cycles. And as one of those people myself, despite now being a music critic with a little bit more of a saltier edge, having been around for a minute now, I do think that it is not necessarily coincidental, but I do think it was certainly inspired by the times that we are living in.
I do have to say that, like, it's not lost on me that the last Lady Gaga album came out in May of 2020, in the middle of lockdown, in the middle of the pandemic. It was an album that was supposed to come out in April, announced in March of 2020, supposed to come out in April 2020, got pushed to May. That is an album that was meant to be played in the clubs. It was not played in the clubs because the clubs were not available for people. The idea of Lady Gaga being back now to sort of have music that gets played in public spaces, I'm excited about that, and I'm grateful for that, and I'm also grateful for the conversation with all of you. I appreciate your time. This has been tremendous. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for coming on the show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. Talk to you soon. Thanks again. Joan Summers is a culture writer at Paper Magazine in New York. Alessa Dominguez is an American Studies academic and culture writer in New York. And Liisa Ladouceur is a freelance writer in Toronto. That is it for the show today. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. Hey, guess what? We're going to be back on Monday. I'll be around. If you're going to be around, I would love to see you then. Have a good weekend.